The galaxy burns. The heretic falls. And the Emperor protects. Welcome, Imperial citizens, to The Emperor Protects. My name is Doug, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Dan from Cubic Shenanigans. How you doing, man?
Doing great, my friend. Doing great as always.
Yes, and today we are here to discuss one of my new favorite books that I did not expect to have on that list, and that is Alpharius, Head of the Hydra, in our ongoing discussion of the various Primarch books. If you're new to the show, we read the books so that you don't have to, and give you reports on if they're worth picking up. And I'm just going to say, as a spoiler, this is definitely worth a pickup.
Yes.
I don't even really like Alpha Legion. We'll start this episode with my preconceived notions like we've done with the other Primarch books. The whole joke of like, I am Alpharius and everything is either like an Alpha Legion ops. It's just kind of a joke that gets done to death. And then I read this and I was like, we need to start making more of those jokes because this is good stuff. And
Yeah.
I kind of flipped me the other way. I was like, no, I mean, it still kind of gets done to death, kind of like saying Dark Angels are traitors or whatever. But it was just an exceptionally refreshing book with a new take on a Legion that I didn't know I was going to like. Don't want to build an army of them, but love it.
Yes.
How about you? What's your hot takes on this before we get into the spoilers?
One of the things, and we discussed it before the show, was the very rare perspective. It's all in first person.
Yes,
And
very rare.
Rarely, if ever, see that. I believe that Gaunt's Ghosts is one of the, the huge series, 15 books or whatever. That is all first person.
Is it?
But
Okay.
other than that, I believe it is. It just kind of threw you off at first. You're like, because we're not used to it. Just the pacing and the way he speaks, his perspective, which is so cool. How he looks at everything. We're seeing this world through a Primarch's eyes, which we hardly ever see.
Agreed.
In the Heresy. So it's very, very cool. And I think you talked about kind of the tropes and stuff like that. This book, when I finished it, it makes me want to go back and listen to Legion now. Because I think I have a whole different perspective on that book now that I know who Alpharius is.
Well, you think you know who he is.
Well, I'm Alpharius. No, it's like Spartacus. I'm Spartacus. I'm Spartacus.
Well, on that note, actually, is like they introduce that idea in this book in such a way that it doesn't feel overwhelming or whatever. It's like a very natural kind of, why not? Which I appreciated because I didn't want it to be like so on the nose that it's just not fun to read.
Yes.
Yes. But no, they did an absolute banger of a job. So let's get into this here. Do you want to kick us off with our book review?
Yeah. So the opening line, we just speaking of that stuff. The opening line is, I am Alpharius. This is a lie. You're going, what the feezy, man? Like, what?
And what did I buy this book for?
It's a lie. So the funny thing is that by the end of the book, you're going, oh yeah, I get it.
Yep.
So we start off with Alpharius and his fleet are hiding among a debris field, basically, that was once an enemy force that was trying to destroy them. They just slaughtered them. And they're kind of on silent running. And you're like, well, why are they doing this? Well, first of all, his fleet, quote, is comprised mostly of fighters, bombers, gunships. He's got his flagship is like the size of a cruiser, so it's really small.
Yep.
And you're going, what is going on here? Well, all of a sudden, Alpharius and his fleet, as it were, launch at this larger force that has come back to the area, obviously, to look for the people who destroyed their ships.
Yep.
And he's actually launched in his personal fighter, along with the rest of the task force. He's small, he's insignificant. And this is a theme we're going to see, Doug, throughout this whole book, where he is always just blending in with his Legion.
Yep.
That is his thing. And when you think about all the other Primarchs, that is such a unique trait
Yes.
for him to do that. Nobody else. I would challenge anybody to tell me another Primarch that just gets down there and you literally can't see him.
Yep.
with he's out there with his legion. And anyway, he launches his personal fighter. They have no hope of defeating their enemy. It's this massive battle fleet of Horus and the Luna Wolves that have come.
Yeah. He's like, and then I saw the ship I was going to attack, the Vengeful Spirit. We're like, what the crap?
Exactly, right? And so you're going, what is going on? What is he doing, right? So he gets really close, and he kind of sees a sensor tower is what he sees. And just before the fighter hits the hull, he ejects.
Yep.
And you're like, okay. Well, he uses his magnetic boots to walk along the hull. He reaches an access hatch. We are not surprised to know that he has the access code.
Yep.
Well, he's Alpharius, right? All of a sudden, he's in. But where is he? Well, there's thousands of crew, like hundreds of Adeptus Astartes, between him and his target, whatever that is. So this is the way the book starts. He's broken into the Vengeful Spirit, and it will come crystal clear why he has done this by the end of the book. One of the cool things is he raises this weapon of his. It's like a twin-bladed spear. It's called the Pale Blade. That's important. And what he notes is that no one has any idea that he's coming.
No.
None. It's just, and you think about the fact that a Primarch is showing up somewhere and nobody knows he's there. He's like, whoa, this is bizarre. Just totally bizarre.
Oh, yeah.
The next scene, again, is just such a revelation, I think, in terms of heresy stories. This is the first time that I can remember, anyway, that you're getting the perspective of a Primarch as he's actually exiting and emerging from his transport pod. We know the story that the chaos, the forces of chaos, disperse the Primarchs everywhere.
Yep.
But when they land, the kind of story is already ongoing, once that happens. But he's in the dirt here. He sees wreckage around him, and he talks about, how he's walking around and he realizes, well, all these pieces of metal are part of some kind of a ship that brought him here. He's asking, where am I? He doesn't even know where he is. I thought it was really a cool little thing where he's looking at the wreckages, the pieces of wreckage, and he notices one piece has a symbol that's two X's side by side. You're going, oh. And if you don't know about the Legion nomenclature in terms of, the numbering, it wouldn't mean anything to you. But if you have that meta knowledge that his will be the 20th Legion, you realize, oh, he's the 20th Primarch. Okay, got it. But I thought that was a great little.
Yeah, no, I thought so as well. And no one else has it. And so this is our framing device, right? While he's invading the Vengeful Spirit, he's reminiscing wistfully. And his life begins with him kicking open the emergency pod and taking it in a first-person perspective of everything. And they're so smart that I don't know if he's supposed to be a baby genius or if he came out of the pod, we'll say small child age, they can kind of reason and talk.
Yes.
But nobody else's story starts day one like that. Everybody else gets picked up when they're a kid in the wild. But yeah.
Right. Yeah, and it was very cool. And then he notices, or he sees that there's some kind of scavengers, I guess we can call them. They arrive on site because they saw the ship crash, and somehow instinctually he knows that they represent a threat. He doesn't know what kind of threat, but he also knows the kind of weapons they have. He knows how to kill them. All this stuff is instinctual. He has no idea how he knows this, but he's relaying to us through his words, I know this. I know what those weapons are. I know how I'm going to get rid of them. And it's just so cool that that's all built in. But he doesn't because he doesn't kill them, because as he's trying to decide what to do and they're trying to look at the wreckage and stuff, a ship arrives. And it's just crazy. So just this, and we know who this is going to be right away. This blazing golden light appears, as this ship, and the scavengers are gone.
Yep.
Poof.
Run away.
Obviously, the Emperor exploded their brains inside their heads. And he comes down and he walks over to this, you know, uh, Alpharius, because he knows his own name too, which is kind of weird. I thought that was kind of interesting. It's
Mm-hmm.
built in. And the figure says, asks him, "Who are you?" And he says, "I'm Alpharius. Who are you?" And the figure says, "I'm the emperor. I'm your father,
I'm your daddy. Yeah.
and you my son." So you're going, wow, what? Okay, this answers a lot of his questions.
I love this reuniting compared to like Russ's, where he has to go through like 3 different challenges and beat him, and Vulcan, where they have to go hunt and kill fire drakes. He walks up and Alpharius just gives him the finger guns, and they just, all right.
Well, you got like Mortarion, where he spoiled Mortarion's party, and Angron, where he
Yes.
spoiled Angron's party.
Yep.
You get those things too as a contrast. And this, I don't know, this just seemed more organic, like cool, you know?
Yes, and to put that into perspective, so this book that we can't trust because of its author postulates that Alpharius was the first Primarch ever found. So,
Yes.
so what he's saying is like the Emperor found me because specifically I was like really close to Earth, if not on it. I don't know. Did they say which planet he was on?
No, they didn't.
Okay, yeah. So
No.
like he was either found very, very early into the Crusade, which, yeah. So because Horus is typically historically, quote unquote, the first one found, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, the fact that he's crashed,
Mm-hmm.
and like within moments of him crashing, the Emperor shows up.
Yep.
So I think you postulate something really valid, is that it had to have been close that he would have seen it crash wherever it is,
Yep.
wherever this planet is. So anyway, so now we go after this has happened, and we're on Terra. You're in the Imperial Palace.
Mm-hmm.
He's a little bit older, but I don't know really how much.
Yeah, they grow
And
so fast too; it's kind of hard to tell.
it is, it is. And he talks about how it wasn't his father who tutored him; it was Malkador. And I was thinking, what an amazing thing to have been tutored by Malkador of all people!
Mm-hmm.
Wow. It's like he's the number 2 guy, and he takes the time to just hang out with you. It was really fun, again, when you get this first person perspective. When he's talking about and describing Malkador, he goes, "He seems to be made of dust. He's cold and he's dry."
Yeah, he's the oldest of old men.
Wow. But he does recognize Malkador's intrinsic power. He doesn't understand psychic power yet, but he knows there's something going on there. And he intrinsically, again, understands how Malkador and the Emperor complement one another,
Yep.
which is really cool. Malkador is kind of the administrator, the bureaucrat, the master bureaucrat, and the Emperor's the conqueror, and that kind of thing. So Malkador uses a really, when you think about it, it makes sense, kind of a tool to teach Alpharius about a lot of things. He uses regicide, which we've heard about, regicide. And this is how he teaches him about what he's going to be doing in the Imperium, when he's in the Imperium. What is his role?
Yes.
He says he's going to be the hidden blade, the one the Emperor's enemies don't expect. He says that not even Valdor, and he obviously knows who Valdor is if he's going to reference him, is aware of him. Like, nobody has any idea that Alpharius is there, which again goes back to your thought of him being found first. Like, the Emperor knew what Alpharius's role was, what he wanted him for. He grabbed him before anybody would know he was there, and then pulled him in and just started working him and getting him ready for his life's mission.
Yep. And regicide, in case people don't know, think of it as like 40k meets chess in the 40k universe. So it's like one of those deep tactical games. And so Malkador is essentially sitting there talking to him psychically, introducing critical thinking and strategy and all this kind of stuff. And Alpharius goes from losing to winning, of course, in the game
very quickly.
But this whole time he's being told, like, Alpharius is like, well, so what's my job? And at the time, because he was the first Primarch found, it seems Like the Emperor was like, we're going to keep you a secret so that our enemies don't know about you. Because what if you're the only one who survived?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what if the others got shot into the sun? I don't know. And your gene seed is stable, so like, we're going to keep you a hidden secret so that we can keep you alive, kind of a thing. And that became his job, was just being unseen, but watching and learning all the time. I was going to say a deity level, but he's a primarch level.
Sure.
But the whole what?
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say this whole time it's kind of hard to articulate because it's first person, but this character that is presented to us is so eloquent and intelligent and bright and like not mean or malicious in any way inherently.
No.
And so it's very refreshing to be like, yeah, this is what your job is. You're just going to observe, make sure you stay safe. It's whatever. Hang out in the background.
Yeah, and you pointed out something that this is an exception rather than the rule that his gene seed is stable.
Yes.
When you think of all the other primarchs who have legions that are kind of broken, genetically, and it's like, yeah, that's great.
I mean,
good.
The next most stable I can think of from descriptions is probably the Ultramarines.
Mm-hmm.
But stability of gene seed just means the number of applicants you bring in and are successfully turned into Space Marines is way higher. So like, there's this idea that the Alpha Legion, we have no idea how many there actually are. Because if more of them are working than other humans being turned into other Space Marines, it's just like, they could be everywhere. That's the whole point. I was like, I love that.
Yeah. And the other thing is he's got the gifts he has are different than so many of his brothers. For example, he realizes that he's got an ability. He doesn't like disappear. He doesn't become invisible, but he can kind of change his appearance to be normal. Like he's like everybody else, even though, and they talk about it in a little bit later in the book, how, he's among humans and obviously he's much larger. He's like a 350-pound lineman in a junior high school football team, right?
Yep.
But people see him as whatever they are, and he has the ability to manipulate minds to do that. And I think that is so cool.
Yeah, almost like was it John Grammaticus? He could kind of do that too, or it's like it's not that you think I'm somebody else or I'm invisible, like it's that kind of power. It's more like obscuring your face so people are like, who was that guy again? I can't remember his name. Exactly. Or someone asks for physical descriptions, like, I don't know if he had a mustache or not. I don't know.
Yeah, right. Yeah. It's so cool. And so after this kind of talking about Malcador and his tutelage and everything, the Emperor comes to his quarters, Alpharius' quarters, and he gives him a hooded robe, and then he leads him down through the palace into its lowest levels. And guess who's waiting for them? Malcador. So this is kind of where he finds out a little bit more about the origin of who he is, and he's shown the first of the Legiones Astartes. This is a time when he's brought here to Terra that Space Marines are not really anywhere. They haven't even been shown to the world yet.
Yep.
The Emperor is building this army of Astartes, and he's being shown the first one of them. And it was, I remember this from somewhere, but the Astartes were actually named after the geneticist who created them, which is really cool. I thought that was a really interesting reference. So anyway, the Emperor explains he has 19 brothers who were also taken from him. And I thought it was really kind of weird that the Emperor doesn't understand the powers that stole them, he says. And I'm going, what? You don't know? And it was like, okay, this helps understand so many things in the heresy that the Emperor screwed up, right? Like, you don't know that the warp or some entities like this took your kids. You don't understand that? It was just weird.
I don't believe him. I think he was lying to Alpharius.
I think so too, which is bizarre. So he kind of understands intuitively again that he is kind of like to the Astartes as Valdor and the Custodes, because he knows who Valdor is. He knows who the Custodes is during this time. And so we understand she's going to be kind of a father figure to them. And then the other thing, which I thought was so cool, is that he perceives and he talks about a crucial difference between Valdor and the other primarchs, in that Valdor is just absolutely slavish and slavish to the Emperor's will.
Yes.
And yet his brothers appear to have created with freedom of thought. Like and this is what he's asking. He goes, is this intentional? Does the Emperor foresee a day that the Primarchs will need to rule without him being there? Mm-hmm. And so he wants them to be more creative and more able to be flexible and those kind of things. What a great discussion to have in the context of the heresy. I think it was so cool.
Oh, yeah. I mean, in just a greater discussion of like creation of like, why were we born with the knowledge of good and evil versus them? How come they're slaves, but slaves to us? Like he's acknowledging like, oh yeah, when Primarchs say stuff, it's almost like their legionaries can't refuse, but I can refuse. And so he's just kind of like acknowledging, I don't know, why are we like this? Why are there secrets? Why are we doing this?
It's true. That is so true. So now we switch over and he's working, quote, undercover. Yes. And this, again, is a really interesting reveal for something else that is well known to be a thing in the heresy. And we'll talk about that in a second. They're going to be cryptic there. But he's working kind of undercover as a laborer. And he's in some wild region of Terra, some desert region, whatever. And what we just talked about is the gift he has allows him to disguise himself. Mm-hmm. And he seems to be like just any other guy, but he's really strong, you know. And so as he's working, a couple of men approach him and say, hey, we need a guard for our convoy. Mm-hmm. One of the other guys we had was found dead. And this is just like, okay, this is who Alpharius is. Mm-hmm. They found somebody dead. Oh, it turns out that Alpharius poisoned him to set this up so he could get this job. Once the convoy that he's supposed to help guard gets moving, they see bandits. And you're going, well, that seems random. Well, it's not, because Alpharius actually talked to the bandit leader and said, hey, I got a tasty target for you. And you're going, this guy is amazing, man. He's so manipulative. He just plans within plans. Just every step to make things work the way he wanted them to and manipulate. Mm-hmm. He's more Zinchian, right? That he does the manipulation. It's just kind of funny.
I'll give a synopsis of this plan here in a second, but you go ahead and keep going with the details.
Oh, okay. So, and again, this is another one of his gifts, is he can kind of persuade lesser beings to do what he wants them to do, or convince them of the truth, as it were. So he arranged for his own demise during the bandit attack, made it look like he died, but he didn't die. He actually ended up opening one of the containers and locking himself into one of the containers aboard a transport. How did he get the access code? He killed another guy and he got the access code. Yep. So he's not dead.
No.
He's opened the container, hid inside, and this is weird. So it's being delivered to the Imperial Palace, and you're going, what? Wait a minute. And you're asking, what does it contain? Well, it's full of bolt gun ammunition. Yep. Intended for the Astartes, which Alpharius just learned, the Emperor's building this secret army. He wants to keep it from the High Lords. And this is Valdor's doing, this whole building up of ammunition and all these other things. And you're going, oh my gosh, this is just amazing how many parts and how many moving parts there is in this thing.
Yes.
To get him to this point.
Absolutely. And I paused at that point in the book, and it made me think of some of the exemplary battles that are in some of the older heresy, like campaign books. And there's one that I love where the Ultramarines despise working with these guys because their military tactics, even when they were friends, don't make any sense to these guys. And you read that in those campaign books, you're like, okay, so they just like don't get along, or the Alpha Legion too slow. And then you read this where it's like his job was to get inside of a door. That's it. Right? Get inside the palace. To do that, He killed a man, got a job, hired a bunch of bandits, annihilated his own transport that he got hired on, just so that he could hide inside of a box that's unmarked because he's been watching the mail. And so I'm like,
That's
yeah, you know what? I bet
it's a great summary of what just happened. Yes.
And I'm like, and that was to get in a door. And so I'm thinking, yeah, global invasion and subjugation probably seems very outlandish to anybody else watching.
That's just crazy. And so, he's in this container, and it's taken into the palace, and he's taken down hundreds of meters probably below the surface to this place where these containers are being kept, with all the supplies for the Astartes. But he wants to get back to the surface because he has even more of a plan. There are more steps that he has to go through. And so he encounters in his Custodes when he's going up there, and you're going, oh my gosh, he has no armor.
Yep.
He has nothing. Like, he doesn't even have a weapon or anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he literally kills the Custodes.
Yeah, he throws a knife and it hits him in the throat, so he can't call anyone on his Vox, and then he just goes and just rips him to shreds. I'm like,
that's all he got. It has is a little knife. Yeah. So he wears his armor as a disguise, and was cool because he ended up going again up to the surface, and he's walking around like, Custodes, like I'm one of the men, I'm one of the guys, and looking at all these civilians, and they're like, oh, there's a Custodes, and seemingly like this is where I didn't understand. I had to kind of stow this away. He goes to this defense battery, like with a big cannon, an anti-aircraft cannon, whatever it was, and he does like a mock inspection or something.
Yep.
And you're going, what was the point of that? Like it seems so random to me, Doug. Like he could have done a lot of things. And then there's this little comment he makes that, oh, by the way, I did leave something behind when I was there. You're going, okay, I guess that's important. All right. It just seems so random, like a lot of other things. And you're going, well, what is he up to here? So eventually what happens is the Custodes realize that one of their brothers is missing. So he gets rid of his armor. He puts on he has a chameleon cloak. So, we can kind of blend in with the dark spaces and whatever else. And you're going, what is he up to here? Because now he's back in plain clothes. He has his cloak on. He's made his way to his ultimate destination now. And he's actually going to a landing platform where he knows the Emperor's transport is going to be landing.
Yes.
So he's hiding in the shadows. And he did take the Guardian Spear and hold on to that from the Custodes. And what he's going to do is he's going to take a shot at his father. He knows it's not going to kill him or anything. It's not going to kill the Emperor. But he wants to make a point here. And before people are like, well, wait a minute. Okay, remember that Malkador, and I think you said it too, told him to do anything in his power that he needs to do to ensure the survival of the Imperium and the Emperor. And so Alpharius took this very seriously.
Yep.
And this whole episode, not only to demonstrate his ability to plan and execute these really complex operations, and he wants to show how vulnerable the Emperor's security really is. All right. And so just as he exits and just about as he's about to fire, Valdor shows up and almost slices him in half. And there's this great fight scene between the two of them. And then Malkador, who's of course with the Emperor, kind of turns his head towards these two and goes, okay, boys, break it up.
Knock it off.
And they just stop.
Enough.
And so Valdor actually says, well done, when they're finished. And Valdor goes, your attack was a failure. And Alpharius says, oh, wait a minute. No, my attack wasn't a failure. You're the failure here. Your defenses are the failure because you see that defense battery over there? Well, I have a special control relay, and I could have activated that defense battery at any time and blown the Emperor's ship out of the sky. You're going, whoa.
Oh, that was his little side tour, was to drop off a thing that gave him remote control.
Doug, this all started with him working as a laborer in the desert.
Yes. Yep. Yep.
Wow. It just, you can't have anything but humongous respect for this guy now. And he did almost all of this without huge amount of forces or giant weapons or plasma guns or
Nope.
anything.
The whole
It
thing
was
cost
just
one. What are they called? The guys in gold.
the custodies.
Custodies. I don't know why I just get my brain.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is,
And,
I mean, in terms of security, that's pretty minimal loss to learn a
yeah.
valuable lesson.
Yeah, and it wasn't interesting. I thought the reference was that the blood games, which I think a lot of heresy people know what that is, where basically Valdor and the custodies run these exercises where they try to break in and find weaknesses and stuff. This started right after Alpharius did this, and of course, a lot of people give Valdor credit for it, and you're going, well,
He got schooled.
he did. Yeah, so it's when you look back over everything that happened, it was a great part of the story.
Agreed.
Oh,
it's also hard to explain without you having read it. This is why I started the video with suggesting everyone read this book. Is he's giving you his thought process the entire time. Do I keep my custodes disguise or should I shed it? Well, it works for now because nobody questions the custodes, but he also sees certain places coming up that, like, well, if I go there, there's more custodes and they might look at me weird. And he doesn't know all their intricacies of their handshakes and gestures. And so it's just this very exploratory experience of seeing the palace through somebody else's eyes. I liked it quite a bit.
You don't think of how analytic he was until
I guess that's a better word for it. Yeah.
Incredible. Yeah, just incredible. So that's all done. And so several years later, again, Alpharius is explaining to us how different his approach to war and conquest is from his brothers.
Yes.
You know, that they are out there just punching stuff in the face. And he's working in the background to save himself the trouble by breaking the guy's leg before he even starts to fight, or poisoning somebody, or maybe giving them a cold, so when they go into the ring, they're not fighting as hard, whatever. Right. But he's got this network of agents. And this is where going back to reading Legion will make so much more sense now when you read that book, because he's got this network of agents that for years have been out there all over the galaxy.
Yes.
And just thousands and he's got his own other legion. I mean, these are all Alpha Legion people, or Ghost Legion. It's not the Alpha Legion yet. It's the Ghost Legion. But they're just thousands and thousands of people out there doing, covert stuff for the Alpha Legion. And they could be actual people who are incredibly loyal to him. They could be people who are a little, hypno-indoctrinated, whatever it is. But these aren't even Astartes.
No.
He's got a whole other army. And
it messes with the perception of how the Legion acts. So, like, another Legion might come aside Alpha Legion, say they're invading a planet together, and think the Alpha Legion guys aren't doing anything. They haven't dropped any actual Marines or any tanks yet. And then, Gilliman gets there and they start deploying troops normally. But what you don't realize is that, like, Alpha Legion has already deployed troops. This planet is 3 civil wars into them deploying their troops. It just doesn't look the same. So you can be mistaken for thinking that they're ineffective. And so, like, no, we're just stirring the soup before we actually go down there. They're going to defeat themselves, basically.
Right.
And I love it. It's just, I love the idea of this tension of just, it looks different. But we're not worse at anything than they are. We just don't deploy in the same order.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and we'll find out soon enough that as Astartes, they're amazing. They're still incredible.
Yes.
In terms of what they do as Space Marines. So again, that contrast between he and his fellow primarchs, and you pointed it out really well, that they don't understand because it's different than what they're used to. So they get to the planet of Thula, and his agents, of course, have already spread stories of stories and slogans of past rebellions that are coming back, and people are getting nervous and people are getting trigger happy, and they are targeting, the Alpha Legion is targeting like cultural icons like statues and museums and all these things, and the people are going, oh my God, there's rebellion going on. Somebody's trying to destroy our culture, blah, blah, blah. And it's just him and his people, nothing else.
Yep.
There's nothing else really going on. He uses and taps into the media and to communications. His operatives do to create tension and anxiety. And of course, this leads to friendly fire incidents, which then offers his operatives to feed the fire and encourage civil strife.
Yep.
You're going, wow, that is a great picture of what we just talked about in action, how they execute this thing. And then what's going to happen is Alpharius and 5 other Marines, basically, they're in Mark II armor. So he's dressed, again, exactly like the rest of them. We talked about it. They've all got cameline cloaks. And then they've also taken a guy named Gokul, who's a psyker. He's a librarian, which was interesting that Alpha Legion had librarians. I hadn't really thought about that. But
and there's a refrain that comes up a lot in this book, which is just the tool is useful as long as you know how to use it. And that is applied to every weapon that he hands himself, or psyker or ability. He just views it as another tool, which is I like that. Yeah.
And it's one of the things I think that people will misunderstand about Alpharius is you're thinking, well, he's so analytical, he's so thoughtful, but he's still a warrior, and he still has no problem like doing something immoral if it gets the job done.
Yes.
No matter how horrible it is, if that's what he thinks he needs to do or who he needs to kill, he's going to do it.
Yep.
And so there's still that vicious nature inside of him. It just doesn't show as much as it does in some others. So the strike team that we just talked about, they're there to knock out a high value target, which is the governor general of the planet. And so it's just this little strike team of six Astartes. We're not going to say 5 in a Primarch because he's one of the guys.
Right.
There's 3 vehicles that the governor's got his escort and stuff. And so as they're destroying this convoy and they brutally kill the governor, they're recording all this stuff. And so then they like transmit back to this this transmission hub that of course Alpharius' agents have secured. They transmit this, and it's seen all over the planet.
Yep.
And there's all this panic going on and confusion, like who killed him? Oh, we think we know who killed him, but we're not sure. And so now all of a sudden, all the sides in this conflict just boom, this thing just blows up. And this huge civil war just starts on this planet. And it was just like 6 guys and some operatives, and that was all it took, right? And the funny thing is, and you again reference this, they know that the Imperial Fists and Rogel Dorn are going to be coming 6 months, 9 months, something like that, to this planet. They know they're going to be there. And by the time they get there, they're going to be going, what? Like, what's going on this planet?
It's
like,
super easy to conquer. Yeah.
It's just so much simpler. Well, it's because, so it's really cool. And one of the Astartes, I thought it was really interesting. He talked to Alpharius and said, when are we going to get our own conquests? Why is it always your brothers that are doing this? And he said, look, it's not yet our time. There will be a time when we can reveal ourselves to the wider Imperium, to my brothers. But no, you just can't. We just can't do it now. Anyway, as they waited for extraction, he gets this message that says that they may have found another one of his brothers. And somehow, like, just instinctively, he knows that this is the brother that he's been looking for of all of his brothers. He just feels this incredible connection to this guy. And the other thing that was interesting was it talks about how it references how a lot of the other Primarchs who were found by the Emperor were found because of work Alpharius did.
Yes.
And that was so cool. And it strengthens your hypothesis that he was the first that was found. He used him to find the other ones that were missing.
Yeah, I mean, that's at least his story. He's putting that forward, but yeah, exactly. I can't trust anything this guy says, but
Of course.
but
I
yes.
am Alpharius.
Yep.
This is a lie. So anyway, the other thing that was interesting at the end of this chapter was, they're putting out all kinds of miscommunications, and they're tapping into the communications network. And one of the things from a local communication broadcast, people are going kind of back to their more ancient roots and everything as they're firing each other up for this civil war. And one of the chants that he heard was blood and skulls, blood and skulls. You're going, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? No, no. Well, that was the only reference to Khorne, but it was just so cool.
I love it. So yeah, they went into the planet's history and found all the lines of dialogue that like previous schisms had used, or like statements or whatever that they would galvanize to. And I'm just thinking, my modern example that I could have, if you know American history, would imagine if like all of the state governors in the Northeast were assassinated in one day, and they all had a note that said like "Sic Semper Tyrannis," which famously is what John Wilkes Booth said when he killed Abraham Lincoln. Like, everyone knows enough about that line to be like, wait a minute. And the whole planet all of a sudden just kind of got into like, oh, these are the old ways. We know this. This is bad. And it just kind of eats itself alive. I don't know. I thought it was really, it was very ingenious to like play on their own history, their own, I guess, mnemonic things that they know. They hear a lot. I don't know. It was cool.
Yeah, it was excellent. And then, of course, and he's going to do this a few times, he gives us his own assessment of other primarchs. But in this particular case, the next part of the story, he talks about Rogel Dorn, who he absolutely despises.
Yes, I love that.
Which is great. He's arrogant. His thoughts are so linear. If you present him with a problem outside his understanding, he simply moves on to something that is, and he notes how Dorn wears armor that's almost identical to the Emperor's. And you're like, well, he's the Praetorian of the Emperor. You wonder if Dorn's thinking, if something happens to the Emperor, then I guess I'm going to be in charge. I'm the guy, man. He doesn't trust Dorn either. He's very clear about that. He doesn't trust Dorn's intentions. And this is where, once you start getting closer and closer to the siege story, a part of the heresy, he says that he has placed warriors in stasis in the Gobi Desert, just in case he needs them for something. And again, as we get in closer and closer to the siege, you're going to see that this is something that pays off, I guess, as it were. But man, talk about foresight.
And his very low view of Dorn, I think, is really cool. When I think about I'm terrible at the book names, but at the end of one book, Alpharius hands Horus a data scroll with all the information of Terra on it. And so it just made me think that, like, you think so little of Dorn, and that his plans are so straightforward, and Alpharius' strength is all the other stuff. It's like, man, Terra never stood a chance. The minute he gave Horus that USB drive of all the info about Terra, like, these guys are so hosed.
Oh my gosh. Yep. And obviously, if you're an Imperial Fists fan, you don't like this, but it's just the truth. I mean, I think about it. It's not giving this isn't a major reveal or anything, but part of the Siege series is the despair that Rogel Dorn descends into at one point in the story. And you're going, dude, stop whining. It's just like, okay, everybody else is dealing with this. Why don't you grow up, man?
Don't be sorry. Be better at your job.
Yeah, thank you very much. Unlock your librarians.
Yes,
Maybe
exactly.
That would help. Oh my God. Anyway, you want to talk about this other one, the next thing about they're over this one world?
Oh yeah. The next world. So they meet up. Let me see here. Boarding. They go to the world of Volda Beta, which did not make sense to me when the narrator said it out loud. I had to like go and read what the actual name was because the way he pronounced it. But essentially, he now is beginning to redecorate his ship because he's trying to kind of fit into a specific part of the crusade. The Legion of the 20th is beginning to exist, but Alpharius hasn't officially been reunited with his Legion. And so they have a lot of human operatives. They have a lot of just unaugmented people on their staff or whatever. Other legions tend to not really care too much for humans, and Alpharius is like, no, these guys are essential to what we're doing, because one, anything we do is for humanity, supposedly. I mean, right? Like, and it's also just how they go to war. And so when his brothers go to a planet and fight it for compliance, they just kind of move on. And Alpharius is like, right, but you're moving on from leaving people there. So if we're in charge of them, we're stronger. Don't just leave them.
Yeah. Yes.
And so essentially, yeah, they other legions conquer and move on, and the idea of the Alpha Legion is we're going to hold these things, right? They're going to make sure that they are dedicated to the Emperor. We're not going to delegate that to humans. We're a part of their force, which I liked quite a bit. Essentially, did my notes get skipped up for some reason? Okay, yes, they approach this new planet, and this is where they've heard the rumors regarding a possible brother, or primarch brother, rather. And so he gets this little strike team. It's composed of headhunters, the librarian. Is there a Magos on that team?
There is, yeah.
Yeah.
Adeptus Mechanicus, yeah.
Yes, and then his advisor, Dinat, or Dinat, however I pronounce it. And basically, when they come to this planet, there's a large number of refugees, and the planet's populace doesn't like them very much. But within that group of refugees is someone who has heard rumors about this strange warrior figure that defies all logic. And so this team lands on the planet. They walk into a market, and they see a symbol of a Hydra or something like that on this lady's shop, and they know, like, very discreetly, this is one of our operatives. They go in, they have some small talk. There's this really cool spy thing where he buys something and the lady behind the counter gives him change, but the change is actually modified to be like a secret code. Like,
so cool.
It'd be like chipping numbers and letters off a quarter until it said a message, kind of a thing. So in his pocket, he can read what the message is just by feeling the coin.
Such excellent spycraft.
It's so cool. And so like the raised areas are 4 and 27. So I'm going to go to this hab block. I'm looking for hall 4, room 27. And that's how they communicate it all. He goes up there, meets the imperial dignitary who's kind of like trying to wrangle all the refugees together, essentially. She directs them to 2 women and a child.
Yep.
Anye, Seve, and Seti. Okay. Basically, it's just a very simple conversation, because at this point, Alpharius and his librarian are right there, but they're like disguising themselves again.
Yes.
And they're just asking questions about, like, you got to be honest with me. Your planet was attacked by a group called the Rangdan, and these 2 women thought they were going to die. And then this weird guy just shows up. He's dressed like a knight with a spear, like an old medieval knight. And he just starts sawing aliens in half and jumping around like a madman. He was bald, and he had like weird blue-green armor. And even though they saw his face, they couldn't articulate what he looked like. Like, almost like he was a smudge in a picture. To which Alpharius kind of like weighs things. He's like, I got an idea. Pulls off his hood, takes off his face stuff, and he's like, does you look like me? And the lady was just stupefied of, one, now it's revealed that she's standing in front of a primarch, but also just like, if you didn't tell me it wasn't you, I would have sworn on a Bible it was you, is essentially what she says. So at this point, he's like, okay, someone who looks identical to me has super strength powers. We're on the right trail. Now, part of this whole operation, the cover that they used to go interrogate these two women, was that the Legion had a mission to go assassinate somebody on this planet. So he just kind of like snuck in with the assassination group. On his Vox, the assassination goes off without a hitch, but the populace doesn't get angry at the people that they thought they were going to. They were kind of expecting like a revolt in the city. Instead, the city just goes, it's the refugees' fault. And so Alpharius is hanging out in the refugee camp when the entire city around him decides we need to get rid of these foreigners, essentially, is what's happening. And they start, shooting into the refugees' holding center, and it becomes clear, like, we need to get out of here, because one, can't be seen or known, but also these two women and the baby are the only witnesses we have to anything that gives us any sort of direction. And so there's this really cool scene where he's trying not to reveal himself, but Alpharius busts out a window and he's just throwing hunks of glass at people on the ground.
It's so great.
Because he doesn't want to open fire and like reveal his position. So he's like killing people with stubbers by just throwing little shards of glass so hard, so fast, it goes downstairs and like hits him in the throat. Until nobody picks up the guns after them. Basically, everyone's starting to learn their lesson, which I thought was awesome. Eventually, though, they do make it in. Somebody throws a grenade, and is it Gukal, the librarian?
The librarian.
Yep. Takes some shots for Alpharius trying to defend him, and at this point, the two guys just go ham. They just start killing people left and right. And it's pretty sweet. And essentially, there's this soft cliffhanger that I loved in that chapter where he looks at the two women and is like, now I know what I have to do with you. Essentially leaving us to think that he's going to kill them so that there's no witnesses.
Yep.
Do you want me to spoil what happens to him?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
Please.
So it's a very small thing in a later scene. It doesn't dwell on it, but essentially he took them off the planet and brought them onto his ship to act as his stewards.
Yep.
And basically just inducted them into the Alpha Legion.
Yep.
He's like,
yeah.
But what's great is you get this little bit of dialogue where he's just like, I don't like death. No, but they didn't have to die. Why would I kill them? Like, just to protect a secret? No, we can make better uses. And you fast forward to 40K when the Grey Knights obliterate entire guard regiments because they don't want anyone to know the Inquisition exists.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so revealing how compassionate in his own way he is for humans.
Yes.
How he understands the value as an Astartes and a Primarch of human beings. And 90% of his brothers don't understand that.
Yes, absolutely.
They just, and it's so refreshing to see this.
Yeah. Do you mind if I keep going? Because I love this next scene in the book.
Oh yeah, with him and the lion. Yeah, please.
Yes.
This is great.
So they get the name of the planet where this weird sighting happened, and they realize that area is currently kind of being, I guess the Great Crusade is being prosecuted by the Dark Angels. Lionel Johnson's flagship is there. So they do this really cool thing. Essentially, the 20th Legion announces itself like, hey, we're hot off the press from Terra, and, we're looking around and we could really use some good influences in our lives. And we got to say, the Dark Angels, you guys are the best. You're the first.
Yes.
So this very, very tiny squad or assembly of 20th Legion stuff arrives to the Dark Angels and says, hey, can we just study under your tutelage? Can we gain glories with you, our brothers, and have a great time? And Lionel Johnson's like, whatever, send a delegation. We'll talk about it. And so there's this delegation. They send like a squad. And I love the way the Alpha Legion does this. They send a squad that has absolutely no unit markings whatsoever. So it looks like they're just basic tactical Marines. But they're all the highest veterans of their entire legion. Alpharius goes himself, not revealing himself to be the Primarch. He's just a guy named Alpharius. And they go in, and this is like their highest level of assassins and headhunters, and they all kinds of stuff. They go onto the ship, and the conversation I think is pretty cool. Essentially, Alpharius wants to be able to move in this region of space with impunity without raising any eyebrows to the lion. And the lion is basically looking at them. And we learn a few things in this scene. One, the lion cannot see through Alpharius's whatever his obfuscation power is. Even a Primarch's discernment can't make it past it, which is huge. Because he didn't know before this. He didn't hang out with his brothers. He watched them. He saw them. But he didn't chat.
Right.
And so they're prosecuting this campaign. And the way that the lion says, like, he's automatically distrustful because you don't, even if they're allies, you can't have your ally in charge of something because if they fail, it might screw up your plans. So he's like, well, why are you here? Why not go hang out with Horus or, Gilliman, these other vaunted heroes of Primarchs? And they basically just stoke his ego of just like, well, depending on how the politics pans out, we're looking around and we just think that you guys have the best shot of, running the Empire or Imperium in case anything ever happens anywhere. We think you're the best that there is. You should be the one leading. And so who else would we want to listen to and take orders from and build rapport with? And just stoke his ego. And he absolutely falls for it, which is the best.
Yep.
I love the fact that he's talking, the Lionel Johnson is talking to Alpharius, who is pretending to be just a basic squad leader. And Alpharius's speech internally for the entire book is this very verbose, very articulate, but when he talks to a Primarch, it is in wholly unsatisfactory sentences of just like asking rhetorical questions, not delivering on full, complete answers, lies of omission, that kind of stuff. So it's cool in this book where he's the talker to see how he talks differently, I guess was kind of what I'm trying to say. So everything kind of goes according to plan. The delegation is sent back, and the Primarch, right? Remember, he's here to go find his brother. Looks at somebody else and goes, "All right, buddy, you just got a promotion. You're Alpharius now." And this is where it all begins because Johnson doesn't know the difference between any of these guys, and so he's like, "You're going to pretend to be me in the delegation. This way, I'm going to go look for my brother." And that's where the entire I am Alpharius thing starts, of just everybody can swap into that role because it doesn't matter. And I absolutely adored that was where it started. That's where I was like, man, we need to do this more.
So good.
But essentially, that's how they get into the system where this other Primarch is rumored to have been, is because they were able to basically manipulate the first into letting them in.
The whole thing you talked about, calling one of his guys over and says, "Hey, you got a promotion." That whole scene and those lines were just perfect. The guy's going, "What? Lord, what do you want me for?"
Congratulations, you're a Primarch.
You're me.
You got the
Okay.
But in this way, I mean, anyone now can be Alpharius as they engage with the first, I don't know, the Dark Angels or whatever, but like
the first
this, this idea that like, well, the Primarch can be wherever he wants. I love it.
Yep. And this next part I really enjoyed because again, it's something that is not only the first person thing, but this is really unique in the Heresy, where you have a Primarch who gives us his perspective on all of his brothers, not just one. This isn't just Magnus talking about Russ, or it's not Mortarion talking about the Khan or whatever. So he just kind of does this rundown, right? And so he says that Horus considers Russ a bellowing savage, and you're going, well, yeah, okay. Russ doesn't like any of his brothers, and then Alpharius talks about how Russ got into a fight with he's been into a fight with everybody, with Angron, with everyone, the lion, and it was so fun. And then it says Russ doesn't like any of his brothers, and if you know his temperament, you understand. The lion, and this is perfect for what you just talked about. The lion thinks he's better than all of his brothers. Of course, this is the ego thing. And he says Lorgar does too, but Lorgar, he's doing it because of his love for the Emperor. That's why he thinks he's better, because he loves the Emperor more. Says Perturabo hates Dorn. Dorn hates Perturabo. No one trusts the Khan. And he says Mortarion is dourness incarnate. I just thought, what a great thing. He goes, oh, and by the way, most of the primarchs just pity Angron.
Yep.
Of course, Ferris is arrogant. Fulgrim's worse. Goldman thinks he's better because he can write stuff down. And then he goes, everybody hates Kurz. And
Kurz hates everybody.
He hates everybody, not only his fellow Primarchs, but his Legion. Magnus divides everybody by using sorcery too much. No one has any feelings at all about Corax because they don't know anything about him. And then he actually lifts Vulcan and Sanguinius up above the rest a little bit by saying they kind of carry the Emperor's nobility.
I agree.
And when you think about that, that's true. And, you know, Vulcan, when I thought about how different Alpharius' perspective is on human beings, Vulcan's the same way. His Legion is very much save the people. Yes. That's one of his main things. And so I thought that was kind of cool. And then he goes that Horus, finally mentions Horus. He's like, he's both respected and he's resented because, you know, everybody thinks he's the favorite. Why am I not the favorite? Blah, blah, blah. So I just thought that was a great breakdown for anybody who doesn't know anything about the heresy. You read those few chapters or listen to that section of the story.
Yep. You
got it. You understand.
Perfect synopses. Yeah.
It was great. And so now they move to the planet of Barsavor, and there's this city called Hydana. This is the planet that the two women and the child had been evacuated from.
Yeah.
And so they're the ones who say, hey, you know, they're looking at this hologram thing. They're there with him, of course, because as you said, he spared them. And they said, oh, here it is right here. This is where you want to look. So they're going to put a team together to go look for something. And one of the things that happens is, as they're looking at this, they've identified a distress beacon that's located at like a power plant or something. And they realize that's where they need to go because probably his brother activated this distress beacon. So not really a whole lot in this strike team that's going down. We still got the Score, who's it's the headhunters, not Score, the leader. Alpharius is going to lead the headhunters, who were kind of like Praetorian guards, you know, for him. And then you got Google Librarian again. And then you have in reserve a company of Astartes and some vehicles. There were also what they call Lernian Terminators. So I guess that's like their name, Lernians, for their big bulky guys. So they know where this thing is. But the problem is where they are in the planet's rotation and where the target is, they find out that it's going to be really difficult for them to teleport. You're going, well, why don't they just take a ship down? Well, just as they were going to get ready to leave, they realized that their ship is under attack by not the Ragdan who thought they were going to face, but this hideous enemy called the Sloth. And when I think it's going to be hard for us to describe how hideous these creatures are, these Xenos are, but it's just horrific. I mean, they're worse than Nurgle, I think, when you think about what they do and how they do it. It's so horrible. But these things are called the Sloth, and their weapons are incredibly powerful. So the captain of the ship says, you know, my lord, we're gonna have to get out of here because they are just beating the crap out of my ship. We'll go to the Mandeville point. We'll come back with reinforcements. And Alpharius is thinking, well, if I'm my brother and I see this ship here and I know it's up here and then all of a sudden it takes off again, that just is not the right thing to do. Even though he knows it's the wrong thing to do in terms of tactics, he realizes it's the right thing to do. So he's not going to abandon him. And they decide again on a teleport. Very risky. What was really kind of fun was they said the teleport was spot on in terms of accuracy, but they materialized like 50 feet in the air. Yes. So these heavy Marines and especially these Terminators like crashing to the ground from 50 feet. One of the Terminators, of course, like broke an ankle or something. And one of the other ones had to stay with them. So they only had 3. So now they just had the headhunters, the 3 Terminators, Google, and Alpharius.
It definitely made me think of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy scene where the whale
Yes.
materializes in the sky.
Yes. Oh, what a great book, man. That's a great reference. That was such a great story. Um, so they're moving towards the beacon. They realize they're still, even though they were accurate where they wanted to land, they're still like 100 kilometers away,
Yes.
right? But they're Marines, they're Astartes. They can move really fast. So as they move, they encounter the Sloth for the first time. There's like this harvester thing. There are these two kind of construct things, and then there's an actual Sloth. And the battle is incredibly deadly. They have these really powerful acids. They're super fast. They have these unbelievably powerful energy weapons. Everything's organic, and it's just one of the Lernians, one of the Terminators dies. Google dies, protecting actually the primarch, and so Alpharius himself was really badly injured as well.
Yep.
So basically, all that's left now, as they need to keep going, is Alpharius and one of the headhunters. That's it. That's all that's left out of everybody. And you're going, whoa! Man, Doug, I'm telling you, after this battle, I'm going, how does the Imperium even fight these things? It was just incredible.
I was a bit confused with the Sloth because they're described exactly like Nurgle stuff. I mean, there's a dude made of nothing but maggots. Their harvester machines sound like the actual, warp vehicle mixes that they have in their army or whatever.
Yeah.
But the bits that we get from Alpharius specifically, I mean, in a section where I don't think he's lying, is just that there's just no information in the Imperium.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, these guys are learning more about the Sloth than we ever knew before, so they don't learn a whole ton. But yeah, no, they were killer enemy. I don't know.
Oh, man, it was just bad. So Alpharius and the headhunter, and then there are 3 Terminators that are still left. But as they get close to the power plant, he realizes that he needs a distraction, kind of. So he sends the Terminators off. They're big, they're clunky. They're going to get noticed, but at least they'll take the attention away from Alpharius and the headhunter. So they move inside the building, and they hear Sloth that are somewhere close. Again, they don't know if there's kind of 3 classes of Sloth, as you described. There's the harvester thing, and one of the things that was grossest about it was when you looked at it, it just had a bunch of decapitated human heads inside of it. It was kind of transparent. Mm-hmm. And so it was just finding human bodies that had been left or that they could kill and just cutting the heads off and taking them and eating them. Oh my gosh, just horrible again. Anyway, the headhunter tells the Primarch, you need to keep moving. You need to keep moving. And I'll hold him back, kind of thing. And Alpharius is like, yep, okay, fine. And he keeps moving because he just is driven to find his brother. And all of a sudden he hears a bunch of grenades. And they had these really cool, speaking of which, grenades. They had this name for them, but they were grenades that they specifically had designed, the Alpha Legion, that had these shards that were coated with some kind of lethal neurotoxin or something else. And it was kind of cool that they have their own custom weapons. And so he hears that behind him, the last headhunter dying, and all of a sudden 3 constructs drop in front of him. And as he gets ready to fight them, another figure appears behind them. Mm-hmm. In between the 2 of them, they kill all 3. And then as he approaches this individual, he's looking at himself.
Yes.
It's like exact copy. And his name, he says, is Omegon. So we have Alpha and Omega. Really, Omegon here is what we're calling it. There's that reference here, first and last. And so they've finally been united, not reunited, because they never knew about each other, really. This is the first time they've been together. So that's why I use the word united. So Omegon tells his story. Alpharius tells Omegon his story. They're having a great time kind of connecting, literally, with their stories are just so, it's just fascinating to listen to them talk to each other. So this wave of these construct things crash through the door, and there's just like dozens of them. And any other kind of battle, this might not have worked if this had been two other primarchs. But these guys, so two other primarchs even probably wouldn't have had a chance against as many of these things, because we know again that they damaged how badly they damaged Alpharius earlier. But they're just perfectly attuned to each other in terms of their fighting styles. And they killed dozens of these things. There's none left.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But now the leaders arrive, these actual sloth guys, and they are just brutal.
Yes.
So maybe a dozen of them. And he mentions that unlike some of my brothers, I'm going to withdraw.
Yeah, exactly.
We
don't need to
the
fight.
hell out of here. And they find a shuttle on the rooftop that Omegon knew about. And as they're heading into space, they've got to get back to their ship, the Beta. But just as they're going up into space, a reinforcement force of 20 ships arrives above the planet. And it was really interesting because you think about what was happening initially, where this sloth ship was just blowing the heck out of this, Imperial ship. But the problem is the sloth were fighting as individuals. Now you had 20 ships in a Imperial battle fleet, which are, experts at fighting a coordinated space battle.
Yes.
And they just slaughtered these things, which was great to hear. Because, again, earlier we both were really concerned they weren't going to know how to deal with these guys. And now he takes them on board, and Omegon gets to meet his legion for the first time.
Yep.
So, very cool. Once they're on board the Beta again, they talk about a lot of stuff. I thought this was fascinating, that they were trying to speculate of how did they end up as twins? Yes. They're the only ones, right? And they settle on the idea, and I think this was Omegon's suggestion, was they were thrown into the warp during that travel, away from Terra to wherever they ended up. And he says they might have even been duplicated. He thinks in the warp, literally, they were duplicated. And he goes, isn't it interesting that there's two of us, and probably the Emperor doesn't even know there's two of us. Nobody but you and I know that there are two of us. And they're kind of scratching their chins going, this could be really useful.
Yep.
Right? And Omegon, says that, hey, we need to keep this a secret, even from the Emperor, even from Malcador, from all their brothers. But then they started saying, we have to introduce ourselves to one of our brothers. So the question came, who do we introduce ourselves to? And they were quite unanimous on their choice, an obvious choice. So they said they'd introduce themselves to Horus.
Yes.
Now, what's interesting, again, is they decide to send Omegon to introduce himself as Alpharius, which was, and it didn't have something to do with the way he would react, maybe just a little bit differently.
Oh yeah, so Alpharius is like, I saw Horus once. He's like incredible. He had his charisma that just melted me. I want you to experience that too, and we need Horus to think that you are experiencing this for the first time.
Okay.
So we're gonna send you, Omegon, as Alpharius, so that you can just soak it in, just be in awe, and let him see you be in awe, so that we can really sell it. We've never met before.
Oh, and so now that all that's taken care of, yeah, it's such a great part of the story. We're back on board this vengeful spirit. We're back to the beginning of the story.
Our framing device.
Yes, and we understand why he's on the vengeful spirit now. Makes sense. He's working his way towards the stratagem where he knows Horus is going to be. He's wearing his blue-green armor, a scaly Alpha Legion armor. He knows, and he does he knows he's going to have to, and he kills crew. He kills Astartes before he finally breaks into the stratagem. But as he's killing, like 4 of Horus's bodyguards come up to him, and he just whips him, and Horus is like, stop, just stop. And interestingly enough, here's another Alpharius thing where he's going, if nothing else, Horus is going to learn how vulnerable he is. This harkens back to our, let me help Valdor understand how vulnerable the Emperor. It was just, I'm going to show these guys that they need to kind of tighten things up. So, but he breaks onto the deck, and Horus is like, he understands that there's something going on here, and he just says, stop. He says, stop. And Horus is just like overjoyed to meet this brother, his last brother that he's never met. And you see this pre-corruption Horus again, that we saw in the first couple of books, right?
Yep.
You see how he can be as an individual and as a brother Primarch. And it's funny how the last words of the book are the first words of the book. And Horus introduces himself, and Omegon goes, I am Alpharius. And he thinks to himself, this is a lie.
Yes. And that is Alpharius, head of the Hydra.
Oh.
And I absolutely love it. I expected a book where, like the other Primarch books, where you have the Primarch that's the topic, and then there's another one that usually acts as a foil. So, Perturabo and Magnus was the last one, right?
Yes.
Yeah. You pick two characters and you compare and contrast them, and that's great. To have this be solely first person, and then just knowing that you cannot trust a single word of it, but it's a fantastic story. It was wonderful. I thought it was just the most wonderful read. It just went a different direction than I was expecting. It definitely paints the Alpha Legion as much more intelligent than I feel like they were. Because, being able to obscure things is not the same thing as an intelligent design, but we see very much in practice how Alpharius does things, what his logic is, how it's first person, but he thinks out loud for us to read and understand.
Yeah. Yes.
It was an incredibly fun read. I love the way he's playing with all the other Primarchs. I don't know. At the very end, when there was just the two of them, I'm like, man, does the Alpha Legion even know that Omegon exists? I don't know. Yeah, they do, but
no.
There was no way to know.
Oh my gosh! Yeah,
I just thought it was absolutely incredible, and down to the details of it mentions the fact that their heraldry for how they decorate their officers, so you can know ranks apart, is so different from anything that's what we would know as Codex compliant. That when Alpha Legion works with other legions, they literally don't know who's in charge. Not even their names. Everyone's Alpharius, we get that. But you don't even know who you're addressing. A captain, a praetor, whatever, you don't know. It just ended up being, I think, I don't know, just a fun read. It really is a fun read. 2 thumbs up from Doug.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you there, man. That's so great.
It didn't make me want to paint an Alpha Legion army, because the best things about this book is that almost none of it happens on a battlefield. You know what I mean? None of this happens on the big open war zones that all the other books have with huge armies of troops. I think the biggest, most numerous group of them is 6 or 7 guys in the entire book. I mean, maybe it was closer to 12 when they went down to the planet to find Omegon. But even then, that's just not an army, and so I love that.
No, I do want to say that I would definitely recommend, if folks listen to this, and I would listen to this first, that you go back and then maybe listen to Legion. We've talked about Legion, but maybe listen to that and see what you think after this. I would also recommend to folks, if you enjoy this, if you're enjoying the Alpha Legion part of the heresy and so forth, in Alpharius as a Primarch, I would definitely recommend a book I just finished listening to. It's a 40K book. It's called Sons of the Hydra, and it's interesting to see what the Alpha Legion has become. It was great. And having listened to this, I'm going, oh yeah, that was a really good story. So, because there's still some of, even though they sided, picked a side eventually in the heresy, there's still this loyalist heart inside of the Alpha Legion, which I just think is so cool.
Yeah.
You know.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's, he's a good guy with a very interesting perspective, given an impossible choice, and
yeah.
but I don't pity him the same way for that choice that other factions I do, which I like. It's a good thing, right? Because he's a bit more analytical about it. So I thought it was absolutely great.
Great.
For our next book, I'm going to surprise you here, hit you up live on the stream. How do you feel about Lorgar and his Primarch book?
Sure, it's fine. Okay.
So that'll be the Primarchs Lorgar, Bearer of the Word by Gav Thorpe. Is going to be our next one.
Sure, absolutely.
Because I am an unabashed Lorgar fan. Word Bearers narratively is my favorite legion, even though I play Sons of Horus on the table. But we'll see. Maybe this one will get me to actually start something else. There's a heresy group that's exploding in my local area, so I've been playing quite a bit of heresy, and I'm loving it. It's just
okay.
A whole new legion is a lot to commit to.
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah, absolutely. No, that's so great, man. So great.
Okay, well, I think that's it. Do you have anything else you wanted to add here, Dan, at the end regarding?
I think that's it, buddy. Just a great read.
Yeah, absolutely. Ton of thumbs up. If you guys have a specific book after we're done with some of the Primarch stuff that you'd like us to listen or read and whatever, please drop it in the comments over on 2 Plus Tough or on whatever podcast site you're listening to. And we'll knock that out next. But until then, thank you so much for hanging out with me today, Dan. It's been a blast.
It's been great as always being with you, man.
Yeah, dude. Okay, awesome. Well, until next time, friends, stay safe, love your neighbor, and may the Emperor protect.